Welcome to Jefferson Liberty Radio, the voice of the state of Jefferson in the Central Valley of California. I'm Matthew. As usual, I'm joined by Alan. How are you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Matthew.
And we have Pat still filling in for Aaron. How you doing, Pat?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Pat, you want to tell us about our upcoming meeting?
Okay, so let's start with October 16th. It's the American Values. Oakdale will be meeting at Mountain Mike's at the Kmart Shopping Center. That will be at 7 p.m., and Oakdale issues are always discussed. On October 17th, Stanislaus Concerned Citizens will be at the Modesto Police Department. We're going to be learning about identity fraud and what we can do to keep ourselves safe. And we'll have more information as to, that will be at 6 o'clock, and that we'll have more information on that, where we need to be to enter the building. And Sergeant Meredith will be our guide and our teacher at that meeting. So now October 20th and 21st will be at the gun show at Stanislaus Fairgrounds. That'll be Saturday and Sunday Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. On October 25th, we'll be talking about the upcoming election, and that will be at the Grizzly Rock Cafe at 6 p.m. 5:30 will be an update on State of Jefferson. On November 7th, Modesto School Board member John Walker will be our guest speaker. SOJ will be at 6:30 at that meeting, and then the meeting will start at 7. Okay, November 14th, more information will be coming on that meeting, as well as December 5th. December 12th, we have updates on SOJ update at 6:30, and Jake Wagner the former MID board member and local farmer, will speak on the water issue, a very important subject for all of us. And that's it.
Well, thank you, Pat. Before we begin this podcast, I wanted to announce to everybody that Aaron had a surgery on his neck. He had it on Monday, October 1st, and we understand that he's getting along quite well. Surgery was successful, but we wanted to, he's going to be out for a while because it's going to take some time for him to recover from that surgery. And so graciously, Pat has filled in for him, and she's doing a great job. Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome, Ellen. Hey, Aaron, get well soon.
We miss you, buddy.
Amen.
All right, well, we have a great interview with Dave Tichnell coming up, so let's jump right over to that now.
Well, I'd like to welcome all the Jefferson Liberty Radio podcast receivers. This is a real special treat we have for you today. We're going to talk about Tuolumne County. And we have with us, Dave Tichnell. And we're pleased to have him because he is the leader of the Tuolumne County Jefferson Liberty movement. Dave, we're pleased to have you.
Well, I'm pleased to be here, Alan. Thanks for inviting me on, and glad I can talk to all the people out there in Jefferson land. We have so many things going on that I'm really excited to get started with this call. I will have to get off somewhere right around 7 o'clock. I'm a grandparent, and I got to go pick up my kids from football and cheer practice. So
okay, very good.
Let's get started.
Dave, you've been the leader of Tuolumne County's movement. How long have you been doing this?
I have the exact date etched in my memory. It was October 27th, the year 2015. I saw in the paper, or I saw somewhere, that there was going to be a speaker in San Andreas talking about the state of Jefferson. Now, the last 25 years, I spent my vacation, or part of my vacation, in Oregon, up at Winchester Bay, kind of a family reunion type thing. And, of course, when you travel up I-5 and you go through a lot of those different counties, you see all these signs for Jefferson. So it had always piqued my interest. So I drove over with my wife to San Andreas and sat spellbound for 2.5 hours as I listened to Stephen Baird tell me all about Jefferson, and even more importantly, tell me about all of my liberty that I had totally forgotten I even had. And it shook me to the core, and I realized that if Jefferson was going to happen, it was going to have to include Tuolumne County. And so that's when it started. And I came back to Tuolumne County, and I invited a couple of my good friends to go out to lunch with me. I explained it to them as best I could, which wasn't very well, but they kind of got the gist of it. And we put together a really quick meeting and asked Steve to come down and talk to us so we could have a committee. And Steve came down. We rented a little hall and had a 2 or 3 hour meeting. And born out of that was the committee, and we were off to.
Wow, that's quite a start. With you, when you started, and you just had you and a few friends, how did you start to build up interest within Tuolumne County to become interested in? When I've gone up to Tuolumne County, I've seen a lot of signs around, and even some of my friends that have gone up there comment about all the signs they see up there.
Yeah, and it's still growing too. It was really it was kind of like a merging of people's interest, and just at the right time. It wasn't anything totally particularly going on in 2015, like a presidential election or anything, but a lot of people were unhappy. They were unhappy with Obamacare. They were unhappy with taxes. They were unhappy with a lot of things happening in California. So the word of mouth started spreading really fast. And we had our first meeting in the middle of December, and we had one of our friends let us use her building, and we had about 50 people show up the first night. And we passed a jar around, and we probably collected $400. And then 2 weeks later, we decided to do it again. And then we had about 90 people show up. And it was me and 3 other presenters, and each of us trying to explain Jefferson, the knowledge. We hadn't Mark down or Terry and Steve Baird hadn't come or anything. So we were just, learning it as we went. And so over the next couple of months, we ended up having 1 or 2 more meetings. And we then pulled some money together and bought a bunch of merchandise and started selling that and raising money. And then probably by the middle of 2016, we were a pretty good sized committee with several $1,000s in the bank, and buying signs and getting other people to put up signs, and working with the ranchers and the large landowners that had highway access for signs. And we got stickers and started putting stickers on vehicles. And so the whole thing just started taking off, and we ended up doing monthly meetings, and those worked really well. So it kind of just started taking off almost on its own, but I mean, that's what way it seemed, but it was a lot of effort going on behind the scenes. That continues to today. I still hold a meeting. I went to the county, and I used to run an organization called TC Facts, and that was teaching America about the Constitution in Tuolumne County. And as a nonprofit group, we were allowed to use the Board of Supervisors chambers. So when I started this Jefferson thing, I went in and I said, I want, a day, and they ended up giving me the 4th Wednesday of the month. So we have a really nice meeting hall that doesn't cost us anything. And I encourage all other committees to do the same thing. These aren't the county's buildings; these are your buildings. And if you want to go in there and hold a meeting, if they're allowing anybody else, any other organization, Red Cross, Republican Women, anybody else, use these buildings, then they have to make them available to you as well. But anyway, so we just started monthly meetings, and we've been doing that ever since. Of course, we've had fundraisers where we've raised over $23,000, and we've had speakers and everything else. But I'll let you ask another question.
That's quite impressive, Dave. And I've noticed that you started out with a very large number of interested people. Has that interest continued even to today?
Well, we started the signature gathering right up front, and we would hold impromptu parking lot drills where we'd pull up into a parking lot, put up signs, and people would come over and want to know more about Jefferson, and we'd get them to sign signatures. every meeting we could go to. We ended up being in the parade. Tuolumne County hosts about the fourth largest parade in California. We get about 25,000 people on the main street of Sonora. We put together a float, and it was all about collecting signatures. We wanted to be able to educate people, and that's a great benchmark for making sure that you're getting through to everybody. But right now, the committee size, it has varied. It was as big as maybe 25 people at one time, and as small as just a few of us. And right now, it's not very big, but right now we're not doing a whole lot. We're still collecting signatures when we go out and put up a booth at the different civic events, but we're not planning any more big meetings right now. We had a big meeting a year and a half ago in front of the supervisors. It's kind of an interesting story, so I'll tell it really quick. Me and a couple of other committee members had met with each of our 5 supervisors privately to ask how they felt about Jefferson. And they all, except for one, thought it was a really good thing and they could get behind it, and it's what rural counties need, and all this other lip service that we got from them. One supervisor was just straight up. He said, "I don't believe the financials. I don't think it would ever work. I don't think you can support yourself." And I respected that, because at least he was giving me a good reason. And so the 2 pivotal supervisors said, "Look, if you guys can pack the room and give us political cover, we'll vote to join this Jefferson thing." So we said, great. And so we put together a meeting, and then they came to us and said, "Well, looks like there's a lot of interest, so we're going to have to move it to the fairground. Can you bring people into the fairground?" And we said, "Well, you're moving the goalposts, but we'll do the best we can." Well, as it turned out, we got a little over 400 people to show up at this fairgrounds building, which was totally packed, and there was only maybe 7 people in opposition. And so we put on a really good meeting and had a lot of people speak for Jefferson. We had collected almost 4,000 signatures by then. And when it came time for them to vote on it, the 2 guys that had promised their support weaseled out and said, "Well, we think maybe the county needs to vote on this, so we're not going to support it right now." And we only had one supervisor that wholeheartedly gave us his endorsement. So that changed everything for us. We realized we were never going to work with the powers that be. And so we just redoubled our efforts in signature gathering, realizing that if we can educate half and get half of the county to support us, we wouldn't need these supervisors anyway. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're probably near the 50% mark on our signatures, if not over. I haven't calculated them in a while. But if you drive up and down Main Street, Sonora, you'll see a Jefferson sticker on about every 5th or 6th car. And as you know, we have signage up all over the place, and people wear their hats. And we're very popular up here, and everybody still supports us.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I'm sorry that the Board of Supervisors didn't give you the thumbs up, even when they kind of gave you a lick of a promise that they would. But I understand you ran for Board of Supervisors. Am I correct?
Yeah, I ran for supervisor basically on the Jefferson ticket. I got 21% of the vote. Being a total novice at that politics part of it, I did not have a good money-raising campaign. My incumbent opponent raised over almost $35,000, which I thought was crazy for a primary. And then the other opponent, he also raised about $15,000 or $16,000. And I tried to do it just by walking the neighborhoods and talking to people and attending all the debates and everything. But I did not make it into the final 2. But since then, I've had both of the survivors who are going for the election in November both try to talk me into endorsing them. Either one of them can't really win without my 20%. So we did another Jefferson debate in our Board of Supervisors meeting last week, and had all of the candidates come, and those 2 sat there and tried to battle for the Jefferson vote. But the Jefferson people that were in attendance weren't having it. They had lots of tough questions that those guys had a really difficult time responding to.
That was quite an experience for you. Dave, we know that this whole movement is about representation, And can you give our listeners some kind of a perspective on what kind of representation you have in Tuolumne County?
Well, we're like any other California county, if that's what you're asking. We have a board of supervisors. I'm not really sure what.
Well, I'm sorry, Dave. I should have been a little clearer. I'm talking about assembly representatives and state senator representatives.
Well, we have Tom McClintock. He's our U.S. representative. And then we have Barry Hill and Bigelow. Barry Hill, of course, is our state senator. He's on his way out. He's now running for supervisor in Stanislaus County. I would not vote for him if anybody in Stanislaus County hasn't made up their mind yet. He is not somebody I think who is worth voting for. I don't trust him at all. He sold us down the river on cap and trade. He says so that he could relieve us of our fire tax, but you don't compromise that kind of a compromise. And then Bigelow, even though he's okay, he's out of the Fresno area, a rancher farmer. We don't see him until election time. Then he comes by and wears his 10-gallon hat and comes and shakes hands. But he really hasn't fought for us very hard up here. We have in the foothills here, we have a big problem with bark beetle and tree mitigation, lots of dead trees and wildfires and stuff. And he never shows up to help with anything going on with that.
Well, that's kind of a classic issue with so many of the state senators and representatives in these rural counties. You have maybe two representatives or two senators that may represent anywhere from 2 to 5, maybe even 10 counties.
Right.
And I think the same problem exists with with your assembly representatives.
Well, even if these were top of the line politicians and good representatives, what does it matter? Because we have no voice. We don't have enough of them to make any kind of an effect on the state politics. They can attend the meetings and they can try to speak up, but they'll just be told to sit in the corner. And when the rest of the state wants their input, they'll ask for it. So there's really not much power that they have. They haven't really put together any conservative coalitions or have any way of building any kind of a power base up against the supermajority that is California.
Yeah, that's very true. We have a very similar situation down here, and we have a lot more population than Tuolumne County has here in Stanislaus. If I might move a little bit further, Dave, I'd like to change the topic a little bit. I've been told, I repeat that, I've been told that you have a great historical perspective on the history of the state of Jefferson. Could you give us some perspective on the historical record on the original State of Jefferson movement?
I think it's a little confused with my interest in history in general and the American Revolution, to be specific. I haven't studied State of Jefferson like there are other people that know a lot more about it. But really, it was a movement. If we think back about the state of California and even prior to becoming a state, everybody knew that it was too large to govern as a single state. And so throughout the years, there's been over 220 attempts to split the state up in some fashion or another. The one that had the most success was the PICO Act, which was right prior to becoming a state, right after we became a state, rather, in 1852, I believe. And we had decided to split it at the 36th parallel, which is right above Bakersfield, Kern County. There's a straight line that goes all the way across the state. And that was going to be the separation of the northern part of California and the southern part of California. But that didn't happen because of the Civil War. Even though the people of California wanted it, our legislators wanted it, the governor wanted it, and the people had a chance to vote on it, and they said they wanted it. We sent a senator back to Washington, D.C. to ask for an Article 4, Section 3, and it didn't happen because they got caught up in the hysteria over Southern California becoming a slave state. And so, but even since then, even in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, there was various different attempts to split the state. But the one that got the name Jefferson is the event that happened between 38, 39, 40, and then 41. And it was simply the same problem that we still have today. We all pay taxes. We all are good little citizens. And then when it comes time to be heard about our problems and our needs, we're ignored by the people in Sacramento. And these people up in Northern California and Southern Oregon was no different for them. They were, they live off of the forest and mining and other agricultural pursuits up there. And back then, they mainly ran around on dirt roads with old rickety wood bridges. And more times than not, every winter, a lot of them would get washed out and roads would get washed out. And they'd scream for help from Sacramento, and they'd get promises, but they wouldn't get anything. So they would just got angrier and angrier. And finally, they decided, heck with Sacramento. We don't need them. Let's just start our own state. And it was more tongue-in-cheek than anything. There was a lot of holding meetings and electing governors and having big parties. And there was one day every week where they just went around telling everybody they were the state of Jefferson, and they printed up pamphlets and did all these things. But it actually started to get some traction and catch fire. And this included Southern Oregon, but they were not trying for an Article 4, Section 3. They were just clamoring about getting help to solve their problems. And then, of course, World War II came along with the advent of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, and the whole thing was totally forgotten about the next day. And so that's my quick dissertation on the beginnings of the state of Jefferson. Anything that happened before that period was not a state of Jefferson. And when the name was resurrected in 2013, it was solely with the intent of doing an Article 4, Section 3 split. So we realized that is the only way it'll ever happen.
Yeah, that's correct. And that was a movement that this current movement started over representation as opposed to lack of resources that occurred in the 40s or 30s, actually.
Ellen, this is Pat. Hi, Dave. This is Pat. I have a quick question for you, and maybe you can help me with this. When I am educating people on the state of Jefferson, they inevitably ask me about Humboldt and Del Norte, and why are they pink? Why is Humboldt yellow and Del Norte pink? And what do you tell people? Could you give me some information on how that should be given out? What do you think will happen with them?
Well, Jefferson is 100% grassroots. There's not a county that's involved that has any kind of formal structure. We don't have presidents or chairmen or anything like that. We're all grassroots, and everybody does everything that they can do. Now, we have a couple of counties here. Del Norte is different than Humboldt, so we'll take Humboldt first. They're a very rural county. They don't have, their largest city center, I'm not sure, I'd have to look, but it's not, it's a population of maybe 10,000 people or something. And the population is pretty wide and spread. And in actuality, they're already living like Jefferson up there. In other words, they don't really give a hoot too much about what's going on in California. They've been making the best of their agricultural situation up there, whether it be logging or whether it be marijuana for years, whether it was legal or not on the marijuana, that's their economy, and that's what they've been doing. So the reason that Jefferson hasn't materialized there officially is simply because the people, it's really hard for them to get together. In Sonora, we have a town hall, a town center, Sonora, California. And then we have Columbia, Jamestown, Tuolumne, and Twain Harte, all within 15 miles. So when you do an event, it's real easy to bring people in and have them attend and have them give their feedback and stuff. And I just realized that, I believe it's a little more difficult in that rural county. It's not too much different than Tehama or Modoc or some of those other really big counties with lots of little farms and ranches all over. It's not easy to get people together. So I believe that Humboldt, if they were given a choice tomorrow, if we had Jefferson going and we said you have to make a decision today whether you're going to be part of Jefferson or part of California, there'd be absolutely no hesitation on that population that they'd want to become part of Jefferson. And so it's just they haven't found a leader yet that can put the people on the ground to go out and get people's signatures and get that whole part of it going. I believe they will someday, or someday we'll just end up, making them part of Jefferson because California is not going to want to support them. Just like Del Norte, we always joke that Del Norte will be a door prize because how is California going to support this little island of a county way up there in the corner of the state? Now, Del Norte was much simpler. For some reason, the SEIU, which is the big services union, that also is a union for our prison systems, doesn't like the idea of a free state, a state that is based on liberty. They, of course, are big unions and want big government to go along with it. So when Jefferson was brought up in Del Norte, it was immediately and vehemently opposed by the unions, and they scared people. They brought in some money, and they ran ads and told people that, if Jefferson were to happen, they would close the prison and everybody would be out of their job. And nothing could have been further from the truth. They're not going to close those prisons no matter what, because they can't afford to close any prison with the amount of prisoners that California has. So anyway, they made the mistake of bringing it to a vote, and they weren't ready, and so the vote was shot down. And since then, over the last several years, there's been a continued interest in Jefferson. It continues to grow. The committee, I think right now, is at a point where if they were to hold another vote tomorrow, I think the outcome would be quite a bit different. So I think they're doing things right up there, and I don't think we would have to worry about them. But you can explain it to people that way, that it's a grassroots movement, and the counties with the bigger populations have been able to move more quickly than the smaller counties or the counties with a more disparate population.
Thank you very much. That helps me tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and I'm glad that Pat chimed in there to bring that question. That's one I've never had clarity on either. Well, we really appreciate your time, Dave, and I know you have other obligations, and I can't tell you how thankful we are that you took time to be on our podcast. Thank you very much, Dave.
I tell people, if you can get 3 more people in a room, I will come and talk about Jefferson. And I also tell people that we need to keep expanding throughout the rest of the state. We need to into Inyo and other rural counties in Southern California. Not that they would ever be physically part of the geographical state of Jefferson, but everybody needs to know that message of liberty and that message of smaller government and representation, because they're all affected by it, and they all have the same issues that we have. Culturally and geographically, they're probably not a good match for Jefferson. And, of course, we don't want Jefferson to ever be as big as the current state of California. That defeats the purpose as well. But those people deserve to have our message, and then they can decide what they want to do armed with that information, whether they want to start a Jefferson-style movement but maybe come up with a different state name, or move in similar directions. We have other states across the country that are going through these same things. We know about Eastern Washington. We know what's going on in Illinois, Florida, Missouri. All these states are having this same problem of not having enough representation. And nationally, with our House of Representatives, Article the 1st shows that we should have some 6,200 representatives in the House of Representatives, yet we continue to only have 435. And it's just it's getting worse all the time with the power being concentrated in the hands of such a few that it can't hold forever. So hopefully Jefferson will continue to lead the way, and more people we can educate, the better off it's going to be for all of us.
Truer words were never said.
Thank you, Dave. Well said.
Okay, well, great. Ask me back anytime. I'd love to talk with you guys again. And hopefully our counties will get a lot more stuff going on. We can achieve much more together than we can as separate parts.
Thank you, Dave, and we will get back with you.
I agree.
All right, great.
Thanks again.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you so much again to Dave for coming on our show. We really appreciate him taking time to come and talk to us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Jefferson Liberty Radio. If you are interested in sponsoring our show, you can head over to jeffersonlibertyradio.com or email us at sponsors@jeffersonlibertyradio.com. We would also love to hear from you. Email us at feedback@jeffersonlibertyradio.com or via our website, again, jeffersonlibertyradio.com. We would love to hear your questions and comments. Don't forget to subscribe to us in iTunes if you aren't already. We would love it if you could leave us a 5-star review. Those reviews really help us. You can also find us on the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and alternative media such as BitChute and Gab. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Jefferson Liberty Radio, and we will catch you next episode.